This build that I'd like to show off is a support build, which is the Chronomancer. Chrono has very good team buffs in the form of quickness and alacrity especially. It is also a bit more complicated to play than the other roles and can be expensive to gear, which makes it always in high demand. As a Chrono, you'll always find it easy to find groups. The build I'm showing is meta, but I will try to simplify the rotation and offer some variants. Your main job in this role is to keep your team's quickness and alacrity up times high, and then if you can, do some damage, but concern yourself primarily with the buffs. For the gear, your main goal is to get 100% quickness duration. You can achieve this through runes, sigils, gear, food, and upgrade slots. There are two main gear stat types for boon duration, also known as concentration, which are commanders and minstrels. First, I'd like to mention that both have toughness in them, and toughness management is important because many of the raid bosses are drawn to the player with the highest toughness, and the person receives the tank role. Most often it is one of the Chronos who elects to be the tank. This video is not a guide on tanking bosses. That will come later in my encounter videos. If you do not wish to tank, or you do not know how to tank, I would highly recommend keeping your toughness low and refrain from tanking. That said, Minstrel's gear will give you higher toughness, vitality, and healing power, whereas Commander's gives you slightly less toughness, along with power and precision. Both stat types give you the same amount of concentration or boon duration. The meta calls for Commander's gear for the extra damage output, but the choice is ultimately up to you. You also have access to boon duration runes, the best of which I would say are the new Firebrand runes, that give a total of 35% quickness duration. Also, you have access to the Sigil of Concentration, which gives you 33% boon duration on weapon swap for 7 seconds, which is very powerful, but does require you to be quite precise with your rotation. If you have the Sigil on your main hand sword, you just need to make sure your base quickness duration is around 67%, so that when you weapon swap, you'll be at 100% and start your rotation. This is the rotation I'll be showing off today, though if you don't want to have to rely on the weapon swap in your rotation, you can ditch the Sigil and try to get 100% quickness duration without it, but I would recommend you learn the rotation if you can. You also have food and utilities. For food, you can use chocolate omnonberry cream or toxic maintenance oils if you're using commanders, or magnanimous maintenance oils if you're on minstrels, or anything else that gives you boon duration, though these maintenance oils aren't super easy to obtain. Lastly, you have platinum doubloons, which give you 40 concentration, which is equal to about 2.7% boon duration. These you can apply to weapons, armor, or exotic trinkets, and if you use these on, say, exotic berserk trinkets, it is a cheap and toughness-free way to gain boon duration. I will post links to a few possible gear setups in the description to give you options. All those options stated, the setup I am currently using is full commander's armor, weapons, and 2 trinkets with the other trinkets berserker, Firebrand runes, and sigils of force and concentration. So before weapon swap, I have 66.59 quickness duration, which is fine. So for food, I take the power DPS food, which is sweet and spicy butternut squash soup and superior sharpening stones. If you are using a minstrel's variant, you can use sigil of water or something instead of force because you have the healing power and maybe some healing food such as delicious rice balls. Your main weapon set will be sword shield, the sword for DPS, and the shield for buffs that it provides. In my second set, I currently have offhand sword for more DPS, or you can take the focus for the pull skill it has, or even just put your shield in the other set like so you can still swap for the sigil, but always keep your shield if that helps you. There are a few variants of traits you can take, but I will go over what I believe to be the safest and best all-around setup that is the best for most scenarios, which is Domination, Inspiration setup. For Inspiration, I take 1-2-2, Medic's Feedback, cast feedback when reviving, and your revive speed is increased. Now, this feedback is a reflect, and some fights it's bad to have reflects, so in that case you'll switch to one of the other two. Inspiring Distortion, grant distortion to allies whenever you grant it to yourself, that's helpful. Heal yourself and lose conditions when you use a shatter skill. You probably won't shatter too much, but this is still nice to have. When healing yourself, nearby allies are also healed. Illusionary Inspiration, whenever you cast a phantasm, you cast a lesser signet of inspiration, which will be very helpful, you'll see in the rotation. Illusions deal more damage. Dazing a foe also applies vulnerability. Signets gain reduced recharge, and activating one grants you distortion. Deal more damage for each stack of vulnerability on the target. Shatter skills deal damage. This doesn't help you too much. Chronomancer 3-3-3. All's well that ends well. All wells grant 2 seconds of alacrity. Alacrity for each illusion you shatter. Alacrity applied to yourself lasts longer. You move 25% faster, and lastly your phantasms are resummoned after the first time they're shattered. For the utility skills, I like to take Well of Eternity for some group heal and a little more alacrity generation, but if you want, you can take a different heal, especially for the Minstrel variant. You can take the mantra to use off cooldown and use the Adept trait, which is Restorative Mantras. I use Well of Action, Well of Recall, and Signet of Inspiration, which are all very powerful for buffs, and you'll probably always have these. The elite skill is usually different depending on the fight. If you need CCs, you want to take Signet of Humility, which is the strongest CC in the game, but has a long cooldown. And if you don't need CC, I would recommend Time Warp, which provides a lot of quickness to 10 people, and can make it a lot easier for both Chronos to keep up 100% quickness. Or you can take Gravity Well, which can help group up enemies and do a little damage in CC, and put out a small amount of alacrity. Also, 2 other skills worth mentioning are your F4 Distortion, which gives 1 second of invulnerability per illusion you have, and thanks to Inspiring Distortion, this will affect 5 allies, making it strong against some bosses' attacks that I will go over more in encounter videos. And your F5 is Continuum Split. This allows you to double cast many of your important skills, which I will show you in the rotation. For the rotation, I usually like to use Continuum Split at the beginning to give myself a nice cushion of quickness and alacrity. Before you Continuum Split, you will need illusions to give yourself enough time. You get 1.5 seconds per illusion you have up. So I start by summoning my Phantasmal Sworden, or Warden. If you're on Focus, both are skill 5. Then the illusion from the sword 3. Then swap weapons, and once you swap, the 7 seconds of your concentration sigil start ticking, so you need to act fast. I like to cast Echo of Memory, shield 4 to get my 3rd illusion up, then cast Tides of Time, shield 5, and this can be tricky to time, but you want to try and activate Continuum Split F5 mid-cast of Tides of Time. Now you're in the split, so anything you do will be reset once it ends, so you want to use as many buff skills as you can. Your priority is Well of Action, then Signet of Inspiration, Time Warp if you have it, then Well of Recall, Well of Eternity, and if you ended up blocking with your skill 4, you should have Deja Vu you could use. I'd recommend practicing this a lot because it's the most tricky part of the rotation. And use with caution, because if you move about during the Continuum Split, once it ends it will return you to the location you've started the split at, which can be deadly in some encounters. Once you're out of the split, everything should be back to how it was. So while you're still on Sword Shield, even though your Sigil of Concentration isn't active, you can use Shield 5 and 4 if they're up. Then swap weapons to get your Sigil of Concentration active again, and right away use Well of Action and then Signet of Inspiration right afterwards. If you use Well of Action and Signet of Inspiration right after, they should be on the same cooldown, which makes it easy. You want to swap weapons consistently when you see that Well of Action and Signet of Inspiration are about to come off cooldown. Also, you can cast your Phantasm to proc the trait Illusionary Inspiration, which I mentioned earlier, which is either Sword and Focus 5 or Shield 4, and also use Tides of Time. You can use Well of Recall and your heal whenever they come off cooldown because they are not affected by your Sigil of Concentration. Continue with this pattern until your Continuum Split is off of cooldown and you are on your non-shield set. Then you can swap weapons to your shield, use Tides of Time, Continuum Split during the cast, then your important skills inside just like last time. Then continue as you did before. Be sure to stay near your teammates when you use Signet of Inspiration, and use your Wells and Time Warp so that their area is affecting as much of your allies as possible. You'll need to practice this quite a bit, but once you get it down, it isn't too complicated and can be a lot of fun. To recap, this build is a bit difficult and you have a lot of responsibility. The rotation is a bit complex, but this is a very valuable asset to any raid group. If you have any comments about this build, or any advice to new players playing the build, or if you have any of your own builds that you'd like to share to new players, please leave those in the comment section below, and I'll see you all in the next raid video. Thanks.